what's up everybody, it's me, Diamond Weep here, back with part 6 for What If Asta Was Meliodas' Son. If you guys have not already, please make sure to go check out the previous parts. There'll be a playlist up here in the top right hand corner. And anyway, there will be a little bit of a recap I'll do before we get into the episode, since it's been around 2 weeks since the last part. Sorry about that, I've been trying to keep up with my What If Naruto had anti-chakra, but it's finally here. So anyway, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this from me. And let's just get into this part for What If Asta Was Meliodas' Son. This is a tale of ancient times, an era before the human and non-human worlds were forever divided. After many, many battles, the 7 deadly sins, an order of legendary knights, would be divided. Dragon Sin Meliodas and Princess Elizabeth would have a son in a faraway land, and his name was Asta. Asta would eventually attain his own grimoire and start his journey to become the Wizard King. Alright everybody, welcome back. It's been 2 weeks, it's been a while, sorry, I've been a bit caught up with some other videos, but we're back, and with that we'll be doing a little bit of a recap before we get back into the story. So, let's get into it. Last time Asta, the Black Bulls members along with the Golden Dawn, had fought down in the dungeon against some of the Diamond Kingdoms mages, including Mars. Asta actually released a bit of his demonic power, and using his physical strength had pretty much overwhelmed Mars, taking him down even with his multi-types of magic, with Mars having 2 types and Asta having 3 types. Now, thanks to their deeds, the Wizard King has invited both the Black Bulls members, including Asta, as well as Yuno and some of the Golden Dawn to go to a rewarding ceremony to give them a thanks for their accomplishments. Let's get into it right now. Asta is ecstatic as he and Noelle Silva are now sent to go to the royal capital for the rewarding ceremony, the award ceremony for their accomplishments during their attack on the dungeon between them and the Diamond Kingdom. Yuno, Mimosa, and Klaus would also be invited from the Golden Dawn, and thus all of them would be sent to go to the royal capital. Asta would be excited since he hasn't seen much city life before, and going to the royal capital is going to be a bit of a first for him, so he was pretty excited to go and see the sights. With Asta and Noelle going together, this would be the point where Noelle's beginning to wonder what this feeling she has for Asta is. It's something that she just can't put her finger on, and every time she gets close to him, she just feels strange. But I'll digress. As Asta and Noelle would then wave to everyone in the Black Bulls hideout, everyone would say goodbye to Asta and Noelle, with the two then heading out. This is where a pretty interesting event occurs, and for any of you shippers out there, this will be something you can think about. In the original timeline, both Asta and Noelle couldn't control, well, Asta not having any magic, and Noelle not having very good control over hers at this point. So Noelle at this time is unable to use a broomstick, and so when she and Asta are about to head out, the following scene would occur. Asta closes his eyes as he focuses on his left half, his half where he channels angelic power. Suddenly a beautiful white wing would burst out of Asta's back, as the long feathers would then explode with a plume, as a bright light would appear, as Asta's left eye would change to a bright orange with a symbol in the middle. He'd turn back towards Noelle, who would be in awe looking at this angelic display. Asta would fly up into the air as he then asked Noelle if she's coming with him or not. This would be when Noelle would begin to turn red as she realizes something. And thus we see Asta carrying Noelle as she's forcing his head to look away from her as she's completely beat red. Asta would carry Noelle as he would then fly off towards the royal capital, and he would arrive there in around 2 hours, with him going around top speed. As Noelle and him would finally land, Asta would breathe out a sigh of relief as his wing would then fold back into his back with a bright flash of light with it disappearing, as his eye returns back to its normal green color, just like his father's are. Asta would then turn back as he smiles, asking if she's ready to go, as he holds his hand out, with Noelle beginning to think, is he asking if I want to hold his hand? Just as she's about to reach forward to grab his hand, Asta would then turn around and start walking, with Noelle getting a bit pissed off at this as she then shoots a ball of water at the back of his head, with Asta turning around and asking what that's all about. Asta and Noelle would then have a bit of an argument for a few seconds and a back and forth, but eventually Noelle would stop as she sighs, and she and Asta would then walk into the capital, going through the front gates as they see the huge city spreading out before them. Eventually, after walking for a bit, they'd run into Mimosa and Yuno, and as soon as Mimosa sees Asta, she'd begin to blush too. And this would be when Noelle and Mimosa would have their conversation from the original, where Mimosa would tell Noelle that she thinks she likes Asta. which would actually cause Noelle to feel agitated for some reason. Yuno and Asta would be pretty excited to see each other again, as Yuno would give Asta a fist bump, with Asta asking Yuno if he's ready to go to this reward ceremony thing. Klaus would be a bit more with Tsundere in this timeline as he sees Asta and turns away, with Klaus telling Asta that he is actually kind of impressive as he turns away. Asta would rub the back of his head saying thanks and telling Klaus he's not half bad himself. The group would then all head towards the royal castle, as it was almost time for the banquet to begin. As Asta and Noelle would arrive into the banquet hall, there would be all these royals from the other groups there, and even some from the Silver Eagles, which Noelle would see them as she then narrows her eyes and looks away, feeling embarrassed by seeing her sister and brother, as she doesn't really want to see them right now, after she had made a mockery of herself with her magic power back when she was still living with the Silva household. Asta would be excited as he goes into the banquet hall and immediately start plowing his face with food, eating as much as he can, tasting the deliciousness of all these fresh fruits and vegetables, along with this fresh, high-quality meat that's in the royal capital. He never tasted anything like this before, so Asta's pretty happy just chowing down on his food. He'd remember as he would then ask if he can bring some of this home since he wants to give some and share some with his mom, because he doesn't really know that his mother has actually had royal quality food before since she's actually a princess, but anyway. Asta would be thinking about his mother, so that was sweet. Both Noelle and Mimosa would blush at this as they think about how kind Asta is. This would be when something would happen that Asta would stop eating for, as we see Noelle's sibling beginning to pick on Noelle, asking if she's gotten any better for magical power if she's still completely useless. Noelle would say nothing, she just looks down, as Asta would see as the royal is about to pour a cup of water on her head. "Hey," Asta would say. Suddenly, before anyone could even see what happened, Asta's hand would be gripping the Silver Eagle's wrist, as he can't pour the cup over Noelle. Noelle would tell Asta to stop, that she deserves it, with Asta telling her to not look down on herself. Asta would look straight into the eyes of this royal, who would now be prepared to fight, as he throws the cup of water away and pulls himself out of Asta's grip, who would let him go. "You filthy peasant! How dare you touch me," he would say, disgusted. "Solid, no, don't," Noelle would say. That's Noelle's older brother's name, by the way. Not the leader of the Silver Eagles, her younger older brother, if that makes any sense. Anyway, as Solid would prepare a water attack to blast at Asta, a few other royals would join in as well. As Noelle's about to stand up to tell him to stop, Asta would hold his hand telling him that they're nothing, as he walks forward and holds both arms out, telling them to do it. This would be when the royals would begin to step down this peasant, as they attack him all at once. Magical power would ricochet into Asta, who doesn't even try to defend it, as he stands there taking every attack. As the smoke clears, everyone would laugh thinking that peasant's done, as Asta stands there without a scratch on him. "That's your magic, and you call yourself royals? That's weak," Asta would say. His eye would begin to turn to a darker purple, but he would restrain himself as he's holding back his rage, his demonic anger. The room would suddenly begin to feel a bit darker, as one of the captains would actually have to intervene. Asta's pressure is almost equivalent to that of one of the captains, so when Flungolion as well as Nozel would step in, Asta wouldn't even hesitate as he looks at the both of them, with the three almost about to fight. Noel would beg Asta to stop as he would then relent, stopping and telling the others not to make fun of your siblings. Also, flaunting your magical power isn't anything. It's worth shit, he would say, as he looks back at the royals before sitting down and beginning to chow down to food again. The room would be filled with tension as everyone's ready to attack Asta, and Asta doesn't even flinch, as he feels no fear from any of them. The only ones here who he knows could actually put a fight up against him, and could maybe win, would be the two captains. Before the other squads are about to jump Asta, suddenly, this would be when the Wizard King would then step in, with him knowing that this was not a good fight to begin with. Since Asta isn't even a peasant, he's actually more royal than any of the other royals here, being an actual prince. But that doesn't matter. He wouldn't tell anyone about that anyways. He then would relieve the tension in the room, laughing and saying that it must have gone to some partying in here. Julius would then tell everyone to get ready for the announcement ceremony, and the tension would disappear in the room as everyone began to calm down. Julius would almost be staring at Asta, which would make him a bit uncomfortable, but in Julius's mind he's thinking and comparing of how much Asta looks like Meliodas. It's kinda creepy to be honest. Julius would decide he'd have to ask Asta how his mother's doing after this whole banquet thing was over, since he hasn't talked to Elizabeth in years. Things would be interrupted though, as a guard would then rush into the room, telling the Wizard King with heavy breaths that the city is under rampage. It's like the citizens have gone mad, there's riots everywhere in the streets. This would be when the Sand and the Stone User would begin to create the miniature model of the capital and begin to see that there were crowds of magical powers gathered around different sections of the city. There was an attack on the royal capital of the Clover Kingdom. Julius would fall into command and lead, as he would begin to tell the captains as well as the other squads there to go to different sections of the city. Asta would be sent with Leo along with Fingolian, as he'd be sent out with those three to go fight the main force. All the knights would head out to go fight, with Charmy now being in the main chef area just like she was in the original and eating food the whole time. Would be sent out along with everyone else as the battle would begin against the undead armies that had invaded the kingdom. Before we get into the battle, we have a small flashback of a few hours ago once Asta had arrived in the kingdom, along with Yuno. The two, after they had met up and the groups in the city, would have gone and reported to Julius their findings in the dungeon. This would be where Yuno would have shown him the spirit, the different spell he had attained in the kingdom in his grimoire, which was actually Sylph. Julius would know this, but he decided when Yuno can't activate it willingly, that he wouldn't tell him about it yet. Asta would show the Wizard King his grimoire, as well as the sword he had found, but Julius would be unable to identify it, just like he wouldn't have been able to in the original. Julius would feel pretty tempted to ask Asta about his parents, but he would hold it off, just like he would feel the same urge again later. This would be when Asta would ask the Wizard King how to become the Wizard King, with his eyes looking rather determined. Julius would have a soft smile as he began to explain to them, just as Klaus had interrupted it, beginning to explain how they can become Wizard King, that it's pretty impossible and how you have to be a noble to do it and have grace. This would be when Julius would interrupt and begin explaining to both Yuno and Asta, who would be rather curious about this, that it's about results, which would cause Asta and Yuno to light up in hopes that they can achieve this. Julius would smile knowing that Asta would become a king someday anyway, and if his goal is to become the Wizard King, then he might have to rule over 2 countries. He would laugh to himself. Anyhow, after the two had their question answered, Julius would then have invited them all to go to the ceremony, which this is why they're all there. Back to the present, we see Asta flying down with his wing now out and the 2 Crimson Lions impressed with Asta's flight ability, as the 3 were then heading over to the city area that they were supposed to be at. Now we see him, Raid Spirito, the commander of these corpses, as he's now seeing a little girl in the middle of this entire courtyard. The corpses have already begun ripping through people, as we see Asta heading along with Leo and Fingolian as they are arriving at the actual scene of the Northern District. Asta would see the little girl being attacked by these monsters with no one coming to her aid, as we see Raid's about to run forward and kill her. Suddenly a blitz of light and darkness would appear, as the two would flash as Asta would suddenly be holding the little girl far away from the courtyard as he puts her down. The zombies would turn around as they begin to attack Asta, the undead monsters. Asta would simply look at them as he then activates his power, releasing it. Suddenly, a purple marking began to grow on Asta's face as he unleashes some of his demonic energy. Fingolian would suddenly feel like puking as he and Leo are there and both are shocked at this power, this presence, this pressure, this darkness. It's so intense. Fingolian would be shaking as he doesn't know if he and 2 other captains could even take down Asta at this point. With a simple swipe of his extended hand and arm, he would slash through all of the zombies, cutting them all in half with just his bare hands, as they all fall to the ground, done. This would be when Raids would summon his strongest zombies to attack Asta. This is when the corpse Jimmy, the one with the ability to shoot bullets out of its hand, would appear with strong physical power as it punches Asta. Its hand would shatter on Asta's body as Asta blocks the attack with a few scratches on his arm, which would quickly heal from his angelic half. Undead magic, huh? Asta would say. Asta would then quickly unlock his power on his left side, as his wing would then appear again with a golden flash on his eye. He would hold out his hands, he would then say one word, one magical spell, Arc. Suddenly, a large magic circle began to be cast around the entire royal capital, as Asta would use a lot of his magical power into this attack. I'll neutralize the entire city then, if it's all undead, this shouldn't hurt any people. Arc. Suddenly, Asta would use his angelic magic, as a sphere of pure light would surround the entire city, and destroy all of the zombies. As all of the undead monsters begin to disintegrate, their souls being released to heaven. What is this? He'd be thinking, as Raids watches Asta as he purifies and takes down all of the undead, his magic easily able to counter this dark magic. Before Raids can escape, Asta would simply walk forward with one quick step as he punches him in the gut, knocking him out to the ground. In the bright light, Leo went to notice where his brother, Fingolian, had disappeared to. Before the actual attack had happened, someone would have taken advantage of Asta's attack with the brightness covering and ruining everyone's sense of vision, as Fungolian would have been sucked into the dark portal and would now have been taken away, just like in the original. A big difference in this timeline is that Raids is captured by Asta, and so they actually have one of the members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun in their possession. Luckily, Asta had knocked out Raids in time to the point where he couldn't take away his own life to prevent information from falling to the enemy hands. So that means that Asta had actually captured a key member of the Eye of the Midnight Sun earlier on than they would have usually in the original, meaning they'll have some more information that they can identify using Marx's memory magic. The raid on the city would have been much less catastrophic, since Asta would have used a super tier level spell almost early on. Julius would have been watching the battle, and he would have been incredibly impressed with Asta's power. "That boy sure is your son, Meliodas," Julius would say with a smile as he remembers his friend. Meanwhile, at the site of the Eye of the Midnight Sun's base, we see several members, including Sally, who are extremely intrigued by Asta, saying that he even captured Raids and his powerful magic. Sally would begin drooling as she thinks about experimenting on Asta. His body has so many abilities. Sally would begin giggling with laughter. She's excited to experiment on that kid. Anyhow, the group would begin talking about how they have to rescue Raids as well as the other members that had been captured, with Valtos telling them that the boss had actually been injured by Julius, with him actually being able to inflict a wound on him. They're definitely going to destroy that damn kingdom and create a new, better Clover Kingdom. Meanwhile, back at the capital, Julius, the Wizard King, would be almost forced to, in fact, actually upgrade Asta to the next level of Magic Knight. The next time there was an advancement ceremony, Asta would be invited since he had definitely earned an upgrade from his current status. He'd also earned a star for actually saving the capital almost single-handedly with that great spell. Also, many of the royals were incredibly impressed with his magical power, having seen it firsthand how he had taken down so many enemies with a single attack. People would actually begin to respect Asta much quicker, since Asta's power is already much greater than theirs. Yuno wouldn't have even gotten to do much this time, which he was used to at this point with Asta being insane. Yuno would wave as he, Mimosa, and Klaus would be heading back towards the Golden Dawn. With the sun beginning to set, Asta and Yuno would be heading back now too, with Charmy in tow. Charmy would now be hitching a ride on Asta along with Noelle, with Yuno shooting a blast of wind towards Asta, and Asta flicking it away with his hand, the two smiling at each other, saying they'll see each other again. Asta would fly off with Charmy and Noelle, as the three would then head back towards the Black Bull's hideout. Meanwhile, we see off in a cold, faraway land. We see someone sitting there with a cloak and a hood over their head. 4 people are sitting at a table with 3 of them laughing. Dante, I can't wait till we can start our attack on this whole world." We can see as Vanessa is laughing. Zeno would be sitting there silently as he also chuckles at the thought of taking down their other kingdoms. Dante would laugh as he says that they'll have to wait a little bit longer for the attack to strike, as Lucifero has a little bit longer in their plans before they can attack. "Why aren't you laughing? Do you not find it amusing too?" Dante would say with a bit of chuckle in his voice. "Taking down these humans, Lord Meliodas." As all 3 would turn towards him, we see the camera change angle, as we see someone with golden blonde hair and dark green eyes as a smile would appear on his face, a wicked grin, with a purple streak going up his left eye, his eye looking darker as he unlocks a bit of his demonic power. "Oh yeah, I'm ready to take down the kingdoms whenever," Meliodas would say, with a smile on his face. If you guys want to see the next part for What If Asta Was Meliodas' Son, make sure to slap that like button, comment down below what you think, and what happened to Meliodas? Why is he with these 3 dark figures, and where is he? If you guys know about that, make sure to answer in the comments below. Anyway, I'll see all of you guys in the next part, or in my next video. So with that, I'll see all of you guys later. Goodbye.